Welcome to the Deep Dive, everyone. I'm your host, and today we are doing what we do best on Talk Tickers. We are translating dense, jargon-filled corporate earnings calls into plain, actionable language for you, the retail investor.
That's right. And we've got a fascinating one today. I'm the resident expert here, and I have been digging through a very specific, very revealing set of documents.
Yeah, we are focusing squarely on the Q2 2026 earnings call for Krystal Biotech. Ticker symbol is KRYS. And if you follow the music industry at all, you know about this notorious phenomenon.
Oh, the curse of the second album.
Exactly, the curse of the second album. You know, a band drops a massive debut record, they tour the world, make millions, and then, well, they have to go back into the studio. And suddenly that room feels incredibly small. The pressure is just suffocating. Are they a one-hit wonder, or can they actually replicate the magic?
It really is the ultimate stress test for any creative engine. I mean, sure. It separates the people who just caught lightning in a bottle from the ones who actually own the power plant.
Totally. And that is exactly the mission of our deep dive today. Krystal Biotech is staring down that exact same phenomenon just in the biotech sector. They had their massive debut hit with a drug called VYJUVEK. But now, if you look at this Q2 earnings transcript, the entire narrative on Wall Street is shifting.
Right, because it's not just about how well VYJUVEK is selling anymore. Even though, as we'll see, it's selling incredibly well.
Yeah, the real question for you as an investor is whether Krystal can pull off a notoriously difficult maneuver. They are trying to transition from a single product company into a multi-product genetic medicines empire.
Which is where so many biotechs fail. They just burn through all the cash from their first drug trying to develop a second one, and they realize the underlying science just doesn't adapt well. But Krystal's secret weapon, we're going to get deep into this, is a very specific reusable delivery mechanism. Their HSV1 viral vector.
Okay, let's unpack this, because as always on Talk Tickers, we follow a strict format. We hit the headline numbers, we unpack the story driving those numbers, we look at management's future guidance, and we give you an opinionated bottom line on what it means for your portfolio. So let's start with phase one, the headline numbers.
Let's hear them.
I'm just going to rapid fire the data straight from the Q2 2026 transcript because it really sets the stage. Net product revenue came in at $119.2 million.
Which is a 24% jump year over year. That is a huge leap.
Yeah, massive. And U.S. net revenue made up the vast majority of that. That was sitting at $91.6 million. Earnings per share, or EPS, came in at $1.79 diluted.
Up from $1.29 in Q2 of 2025.
Right. And net income hit $54.8 million. Yeah. But okay, here's the metric that made me actually do a double take when I was reading the report. They are reporting a 95% gross margin.
Up from 93%. Yeah, 95% gross margin in physical manufacturing is just, it's an absolute anomaly.
Wait, a biotech company that is actually printing money and not just burning it? How rare is this? I mean, when I see margins like that, I assume I'm looking at an enterprise software company.
Right. Like if you're selling digital subscriptions, the cost to duplicate code is basically zero. But Krystal is manufacturing a highly complex physical genetic medicine. You have to cultivate cells, purify viral vectors, manage cold chain logistics.
So how are they pushing a physical supply chain to a 95% margin?
You have to look at the cost of goods sold, the COGS. This shows their massive operational leverage. In Q2 of last year, their COGS was $7.2 million. But this quarter, despite sales volume increasing by 24%, their COGS actually dropped to $6.4 million.
Wait, hold on. Let me make sure I'm parsing this right. They sold 24% more physical drug, but their total manufacturing cost went down by nearly $1 million.
Yes.
That goes against basic math.
It goes against linear math, sure. But it perfectly illustrates economies of scale in biologic manufacturing. When you first ramp up a commercial gene therapy, your fixed costs are astronomical. You have massive bioreactors, clean rooms, specialized personnel.
And if you're only running those reactors at 20% capacity to meet early demand, you're paying a huge premium per vial.
Exactly. The cost per vial is incredibly high. But as demand scales up, as they hit that 24% revenue jump, they utilize that exact same fixed infrastructure way more efficiently. They run larger batches. The yield improves. The marginal cost of producing each additional vial just plummets.
So they aren't just selling more. They are literally getting cheaper at making it.
Right. And that operational leverage flows straight to the bottom line. It's how they generated that $54.8 million in net income.
Which brings us to their war chest. They are sitting on $1.1 billion in cash and investments.
It's massive.
In this macroeconomic environment, I mean, that isn't just a shock absorber, it's a weapon.
Right. It is absolute strategic sovereignty. You have to contextualize what it means to be a biotech company right now. Capital is so expensive. The IPO window is tight. VC money has pulled back.
So the standard playbook for most mid-cap biotechs is to just constantly go back to Wall Street, hat in hand, asking for more cash to keep their clinical trials running.
Which is terrible for the retail investor.
Right, because if they issue a huge secondary stock offering, they're just printing new shares, they dilute the ownership stake of everyone who already bought in, your slice of the pie just arbitrarily shrinks.
And in a high interest rate environment, those secondary offerings are often priced at a steep discount to the current stock price. It triggers an immediate sell-off. But Krystal has completely removed that existential threat for you.
So with $1.1 billion in the bank, they don't need Wall Street's lifeline.
Not at all. They're entirely self-funded. They control their own destiny.
Okay, so that's the what of the numbers. But as we know, numbers only tell you what happened. They don't tell you how it happened. Let's pivot seamlessly into part 2 of the deep dive, the story behind the numbers, the commercial story driving this massive cash flow.
And that story begins with the U.S. rollout for VYJUVEK, which management noted is just an absolute juggernaut right now.
They hit over 730 U.S. reimbursement approvals this quarter. And they mentioned that blows right past their initial target, which was 60% market penetration. This is for a very rare disease called dystrophic epidermolysis bullosa, or DEB.
DEB, right. And to fully appreciate why this commercial success is so sticky, we have to look at what DEB actually is at a molecular level.
Yeah, because I think when people hear skin condition, they picture like bad eczema or a rash, but DEB is a devastating, life-altering condition.
It is horrific. DEB is a rare monogenic skin disorder. Basically, patients have a mutation in a single gene, the COL7A1 gene.
Which is responsible for making collagen, right?
Yes, specifically collagen type 7. In a healthy person, this collagen forms these intricate anchoring fibrils. Think of them as microscopic molecular Velcro.
Microscopic Velcro, okay.
Yeah, it physically loops through the basement membrane zone, binding the outer layer of your skin, the epidermis, tightly to the inner layer, the dermis.
So without that Velcro, your skin layers literally just don't stick together.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Because they lack this anchoring protein, the slightest friction, just rubbing the skin, wearing tight clothes, causes the skin layers to shear apart. The space fills with fluid. It creates severe, agonizing blisters.
Wow.
Yeah, these patients are often called butterfly children because their skin is as fragile as a butterfly's wings. They live with chronic open wounds that have to be constantly bandaged.
And before VYJUVEK came along, there was no treatment for the root cause, right? It was purely palliative care.
Right. Just bandaging wounds, fighting off infections, managing severe pain. That was the reality. But VYJUVEK completely changes that paradigm. It's a topical gene therapy. You apply it directly to the wounds as a gel.
Which is incredible.
It delivers functional, healthy copies of that COL7A1 gene directly into the patient's skin cells. The cells take up the new blueprint, they start manufacturing their own collagen type 7, and they temporarily create that missing molecular Velcro. The chronic wounds can finally close.
And what really stood out to me in the earnings transcript wasn't just the clinical success, but the commercial logistics, the where of the treatment.
The shift to the community setting.
Exactly. They have over 640 niche prescribers in the U.S. now, and they're aggressively shifting the administration of this drug away from specialized academic hospitals and moving it into patients' homes. Why is that shift so critical for their bottom line?
Well, it's the difference between a niche, hard-to-access medical intervention, a truly scalable commercial product. If a patient with severe DEB has to travel 4 hours to a university hospital every single time they need treatment.
And traveling is incredibly painful for them.
Exactly. The bottleneck for your revenue becomes travel logistics, hospital bed availability, and patient exhaustion. By pushing this out to 640 prescribers and facilitating at-home care, Krystal systematically removes the friction from their revenue model.
They are building what I would call a community moat, because getting someone on a chronic therapy is one thing, but keeping them compliant requires infrastructure. The transcript highlights their grassroots strategy, things like virtual webinars with Debra of America to teach at-home bandaging.
And the VYJUVEK Voices program.
Right. A peer-to-peer network connecting new patients with trained ambassadors.
It's textbook patient-centric marketing. When a patient gets complex gene therapy at home, there's a steep learning curve. By building this peer-to-peer network, Krystal provides continuous emotional and logistical support that doctors just don't have time for. It makes the revenue incredibly sticky.
Yeah, and it makes it so hard for competitors to disrupt. If someone invents a new DEB drug in 5 years, they don't just have to beat Krystal's science. They have to break through this deeply entrenched, highly loyal patient community. That's a massive moat.
It absolutely is. But keeping all that U.S. success in mind, we need to address a glaring discrepancy in the data: the international revenue.
Yes. Okay, let's do some translation for the listener here, because this stood out to me as a huge red flag initially. The U.S. revenue was roaring at $91.6 million, but the European and Japanese revenues combined were described by management as, quote, broadly flat for the quarter.
Yeah, and broadly flat early in a global launch is exactly the kind of phrase that triggers algorithmic panic selling on Wall Street.
Exactly. If the drug is a home run in the U.S. and the biology of the disease is the exact same overseas, why is it stalling? Did demand just dry up in Germany? If I'm a retail investor, that looks awful.
And what's fascinating here is that we have to separate clinical reality from accounting mechanics. The flat revenue has absolutely nothing to do with patient demand. This is purely an artifact of international healthcare economics. We need to unpack a term they used a lot on the call: the pricing reserve provision.
Right. Laurent Gu, the GM for Europe, specifically blamed this provision, especially in Germany. Walk us through this, because pricing reserve provision sounds like Wall Street jargon for the money vanished.
The money hasn't vanished. It's just trapped in an accounting waiting room. To understand why, you have to look at the AMIG system in Germany. It's radically different from the fragmented US system.
Okay, how does AMIG work?
When an innovative new drug like VYJUVEK launches in Germany, Krystal is allowed to set a preliminary free market price for the first year.
So they get to charge their ideal price right out of the gate.
Yeah.
That sounds great for top-line revenue.
It is, temporarily. But during that first year, the German health authorities are conducting an exhaustive evaluation of the drug's clinical benefits. And after that year, they sit down at the negotiating table with Krystal to hammer out a final permanent reimbursement price.
And since they are a single-payer system with massive negotiating power, I'm guessing that final price is lower.
Almost always. But here's the kicker that causes the accounting headache. Once that new lower price is finalized, it's often applied retroactively.
Oh, wow. Wait, so Krystal has been selling the drug for months at the high price, but if the final price is lower, they actually owe the German government a refund on all the past sales.
Precisely. It's a retroactive rebate. Since Krystal is right in the middle of these negotiations, which should wrap up by late 2026, U.S. accounting standards force them to be highly conservative. They can't legally record all that German cash as pure top-line revenue because they know they might have to give a chunk back.
Ah, so they create this pricing reserve provision. They set a large portion of the sales aside as a liability.
Exactly. It completely suppresses their reported quarterly revenue, making it look flat, even though they are literally shipping more product.
That makes total sense now, because management noted over 180 international patients are being treated, and vial volume is actually up quarter over quarter. But because of this accounting reserve, it looks stagnant.
The revenue is just deferred. Once the price is officially signed in ink, the reserve goes away, and you'll see the normalized revenue flow clearly onto the income statement.
So for you listening right now, the actionable advice is simple. Do not panic about the flat European numbers. Don't let an accounting mirage shake you out of your position. The demand hasn't stalled.
Not at all. Which brings us to the big question. If we connect this to the bigger picture, what is Krystal doing with all this cash? They have a $1.1 billion war chest, a commercial monopoly in DEB, and international headwinds are temporary. So where are they going next?
This is the perfect transition to part 3 of our Talk Tickers deep dive, management guidance and the pipeline, basically the future.
And from a pure financial guidance perspective, they're pretty brief. Non-GAAP operating expense guidance is unchanged at $175 million to $195 million for 2026.
Steady as she goes.
Very disciplined. But the real guidance on this call was their clinical roadmap.
Oh, yeah. We need to talk about the pipeline sprawl, because when you look at all the diseases they are targeting over the next 18 months, it looks like a shotgun approach. Let me run through these for you really quick. First, the eye. They have KB803 for IDEB, readout in Q4 2026. Then KB801 for neurotrophic keratitis, finishing enrollment late this year.
2 distinct front-of-the-eye indications.
Right. Then they pivot to the lungs. KB407 for cystic fibrosis, interim results late this year, then back to the skin. KB1001 for Hailey-Hailey disease. Interim results late this year. And then this is a wild one. They're going after cancer tumors. Inhaled KB707 for lung cancer and intratumoral KB707 for Gorlin syndrome.
Is his massive clinical footprint.
Wait. I have to play devil's advocate here. If you're a company that makes a topical gel for skin blisters and suddenly you are trying to cure corneal degeneration, cystic fibrosis, and late-stage lung cancer, aren't you spreading yourself way too thin? That sounds like a recipe for a massive cash bonfire.
It's a very logical fear. If they were developing 5 completely different small molecule drugs from scratch, it would be an absurdly reckless cash bonfire. But that fundamentally isn't what they're doing. To understand why this is actually a ruthlessly efficient strategy, we have to talk about the delivery truck.
The delivery truck analogy, I love this. It's exactly how I conceptualize Krystal's valuation for our listeners. Imagine you own a logistics company. Your most valuable asset isn't the specific cargo in the trunk today, it's the fleet of indestructible delivery trucks you built.
Right.
If you want to expand from delivering electronics to delivering groceries, you don't invent a new truck. You keep the exact same truck, the same engine, and you just swap out the cargo in the back.
That analogy is spot on. And the delivery truck for Krystal is their proprietary HSV-1 viral vector, herpes simplex virus type 1. Now, obviously, herpes sounds alarming, but you have to understand the molecular engineering here. Krystal scientists took the natural HSV-1 virus and completely gutted it. They painstakingly removed all the genes that cause disease or replication.
So it's literally just an empty biological shell, a hollowed-out truck.
Exactly. But it retains the virus's evolutionary advantages. HSV-1 has a natural biological affinity for skin cells, mucosal surfaces, and nerve cells. It penetrates them incredibly efficiently. Furthermore, HSV-1 is a physically massive virus compared to other gene therapy vectors, like AAV.
Adeno-associated virus.
Right. Because HSV-1 is so big, the cargo space in the back of the truck is huge. They can pack massive genes, or multiple genes, into a single vector.
Like the CL7A1 gene for VYJUVEK. The thing is notoriously huge. It wouldn't even fit inside an AAV vector.
Exactly, it wouldn't fit. And here is the absolute most crucial biological detail. HSV-1 is non-integrating. It is episomal.
Let's break that down. What's the functional difference between an integrating vector and an episomal one for the actual patient?
It's a difference between a risky one-and-done shot and a safe, reducible therapy. A lot of early gene therapies used retroviruses that physically spliced the new genetic code directly into the patient's existing DNA. It's a permanent change, and it carries a massive risk of insertional mutagenesis.
Meaning, if it splices the gene into the wrong spot, like a tumor suppressor gene,
it can potentially cause cancer. The cure causes a new disease. Furthermore, the patient's immune system recognizes integrating vectors, so you can only give the therapy once. If it wears off in 5 years, you can't give a second dose because their immune system will just destroy it.
But Krystal's HSV-1 truck is episomal.
Yes. When it delivers the genetic cargo into the nucleus, it forms a distinct circular piece of DNA called an episome. It sits next to the patient's chromosomes. It doesn't splice itself in, so there's no risk of insertional mutagenesis. And because HSV-1 naturally evades the immune system, you can redose the patient safely, indefinitely.
Wow, so bring this back to my fear about the cash bonfire. How does this truck save them money as they expand into CF and lung cancer?
Because the FDA has already rigorously reviewed and approved the safety profile of that exact HSV-1 truck when they approved VYJUVEK. The entire manufacturing process, the cell line cultivation, the safety assays, the whole CMC, the chemistry, manufacturing, and controls has been fully validated by the FDA.
I see. So for the cystic fibrosis drug, KB803, they aren't inventing a new delivery system for the lungs from scratch. They take the exact same FDA-approved truck, roll it off the same manufacturing line, and just swap the DEB skin gene for the CFTR lung gene.
That's exactly it. They skip years of foundational R&D and regulatory delays. They leverage the exact same core technology across different diseases. That is the operational leverage of a true platform company. It's why they can expand the pipeline without burning their cash reserves.
It is brilliant. So let's look at some of these specific readouts, because these are the actionable catalysts you need to watch. Starting with the eye. Suma Krishnan, the president of R&D, made an interesting point on the call. She said the front of the eye is historically a difficult-to-shoot target. Why is that, if it's right there on the surface?
Because the eye is biologically designed to flush foreign objects away. Rapid cell turnover, constant tears. If you put a traditional biologic drop in the eye, you blink, the tears wash it away, and it's gone before it can penetrate the cornea.
But the HSV-1 truck can breach it.
Yes, because HSV-1 naturally infects mucosal surfaces and nerves, it rapidly penetrates the corneal tissue and delivers the payload before the eye can flush it out.
And that brings us to their 2 eye trials, KB803 for ocular DE, the IOLITE study, and KB801 for neurotrophic keratitis, or NK. What's fascinating is the stark contrast in how they measure success in these 2 trials. For the IOLITE study, the primary endpoint is entirely subjective, patient-reported outcomes.
Right. They aren't relying on doctors taking high-resolution images of cellular healing. The patients just use a 1 to 5 scale to report their daily pain and extreme light sensitivity.
Which makes sense. If you aren't feeling the agonizing pain of a blister forming on your eyeball, the drug is working. But management noted European regulators hate subjective endpoints. They want hard data.
Right. The EMA demands objective proof of biological change.
Which Krystal is delivering in the other trial, Emerald-1 for NK. What exactly is NK?
Neurotrophic keratitis. It's a rare disease where the sensory nerves in the cornea are damaged. Those nerves provide vital chemical signals to keep the cornea regenerating. Without them, the surface breaks down, leading to chronic open wounds on the eye called neurotrophic ulcers. It ultimately leads to blindness.
And measuring success here is brutally objective.
Very objective. A doctor takes a high-res image of the open wound at baseline, measures it in millimeters, treats the eye with KB801 drops, and images it again later. The primary endpoint is complete, visually verified wound closure. The hole either healed or it didn't.
Yeah, and there was some drama on the call regarding this trial. An analyst brought up a single patient who had complete wound closure with KB801. But the CEO, Krishnan, immediately jumped in and heavily caveated it. He was basically saying, don't get too excited about a sample size of 1. Usually, biotech CEOs are desperate to hype up any positive news. Why the caution?
It's the tension between legal disclosure and scientific rigor. Krystal legally had to disclose that patient's outcome in a patent filing. But scientifically, an N of 1 is statistically meaningless. That patient might have healed spontaneously. The CEO is actively protecting the integrity of the broader Emerald-1 trial because he knows the FDA only cares about statistically significant data across a whole cohort.
It's actually really refreshing to see a CEO downplay early data. It shows confidence in the platform. Okay, moving to the lungs. KB407 for cystic fibrosis. This is a massive market, but there are already blockbuster drugs out there, like Trikafta from Vertex. How does Krystal compete with a behemoth like Vertex?
It's a flanking maneuver. Cystic fibrosis is caused by mutations in the CFTR gene, which regulates salt and fluids in the lungs. When it's defective, sticky mucus builds up, causing severe infections. Existing drugs like Trikafta are chemical chaperones. They bind to the defective CFTR protein and help it fold correctly.
But they only work if you have a specific mutation that produces a misfolded protein.
Right. Krystal's targeting the 10% of patients who are refractory to those drugs. Patients with null mutations who produce absolutely no CFTR protein at all. A chaperone drug can't fix a protein that literally isn't there.
But Krystal's truck just bypasses the broken genetics and delivers a brand new functional copy of the gene. It's mutation agnostic.
Precisely. They're running a small 5-patient safety study right now, testing an inhaled nebulizer. If they show improved lung function, even a hint of it, in these severe patients, it totally validates inhaled delivery of HSV-1.
Incredible. And then there's KB111 for Hailey-Hailey disease, another rare skin condition with severe blisters. The regulatory hurdle here was wild. The FDA didn't even have a standardized way to measure this disease. Krystal had to run a 5-month natural history study with 70 patients just to invent the grading scale.
Which demonstrates the difficulty of being a first mover. But by developing that validated scale, Krystal literally wrote the regulatory rulebook for the disease. If a competitor wants to enter the space, they have to use Krystal's yardstick.
It's a huge competitive advantage. Okay, finally, the most ambitious program, oncology. KB707. They're driving the truck straight into cancer. Inhaled KB707 for non-small cell lung cancer showed a 36% response rate as a monotherapy.
Highly encouraging for late-line patients who have failed chemo.
But the combination data was wild. They paired it with Merck's Keytruda and immunotherapy and saw a 31% response rate with great durability. Why pair a viral vector with an immunotherapy?
You have to look at how cancer hides. Tumors create an immunosuppressive shield that puts the patient's T cells to sleep. Keytruda works by taking the brakes off the immune system, waking those T cells up.
But it only works if the immune system recognizes the tumor as a threat. If it's a cold tumor, Keytruda has nothing to amplify.
Exactly. And That is where KB707 comes in. It acts as a biological flare gun. The HSV1 vector infects the cancer cells and is programmed to express potent immune-stimulating cytokines IL-12 and IL-2. It lights the tumor up from the inside, causing massive inflammation that draws the immune system in. It turns a cold tumor hot.
So the flare gun brings the T cells to the tumor, and Keytruda keeps them awake and aggressive. It's a synergistic 1-2 punch.
Brilliant mechanism. And they're using that same flare gun topically for Gorlin syndrome, where patients get hundreds of basal cell carcinomas on their face. The standard of care is barbaric, just constantly slicing them off with a scalpel.
So instead of surgery, a dermatologist just injects the vector directly into the tumor, fires the flare gun, and the patient's own immune system clears it.
That's the goal of the OPAL-1 trial. We'll get an update later this year. And strategically, the dermatologists treating Gorlin syndrome are often the exact same ones prescribing VYJUVEK for DB.
So the operational leverage extends right down to the sales force. The same rep can sell the DEB drug on Tuesday and the cancer drug on Thursday. The brilliance just compounds. Okay, we've unpacked the massive cash flow, the international accounting mirage, the sprawling HSV1 pipeline. What does this all mean for the retail investor?
It's time for the bottom line.
Yep. Part 4 of Talk Tickers, the bottom line. We are taking a definitive stance here. Based on this Q2 2026 transcript, we are calling this a strong bullish signal for Krystal Biotech.
I completely agree. Krystal is an absolute anomaly. They have a self-sustaining commercial engine with 95% margins, funding a massive R&D pipeline. They aren't burning cash, they are printing it.
And with that $1.1 billion cash fortress, you, as a retail investor, don't have to lose sleep over surprise dilution. The balance sheet is bulletproof.
And the primary bear argument, the flat international revenue, is easily debunked as a temporary accounting provision during single-payer negotiations. It's not a fundamental flaw.
So, actionable advice for you if you hold or want to buy KRYS. Do not get distracted by European revenue blips over the next 6 months. Keep your focus on the U.S. commercial juggernaut.
And calibrate your expectations around the true valuation catalysts. The massive leaps in the stock won't come from incremental skin sales. They will come from clinical readouts proving the platform works in new organs.
Circle Q4 2026 for the IOLITE eye readout. Circle early 2027 for the Emerald-1 eye readout and the lung cancer update. If those hit, Krystal sheds the single product label and becomes a platform giant. They will have proven they can write that second and third hit record.
It's a pivotal transition year.
But before we sign off, there is one final lingering detail that we have to talk about. A massive opportunity and a huge challenge. Management noted they are successfully targeting the roughly 1,200 diagnosed DEB patients in the U.S.
But epidemiological data suggests there are another 3,000 undiagnosed DEB patients out there.
Exactly. 3,000 people living with these agonizing blisters who just think they have terrible skin. They've never been genetically tested.
Which raises a provocative question about Krystal's future commercial strategy. Right now, they market efficiently to specialized wound care doctors who already know these 1,200 patients.
But how do you pivot a massive marketing machine to find patients who don't even know they have the disease? You can't just send a sales rep to ask a doctor for undiagnosed patients. You have to pivot to direct-to-consumer marketing.
It requires a completely different skill set. Broad disease awareness campaigns, navigating DTC advertising ethics on social media, and setting up frictionless genetic testing infrastructure so someone who sees an ad on Instagram can actually get diagnosed easily.
It's a massive untapped revenue pool that could triple peak sales, but it's going to test their agility. It's one thing to sell a miracle cure to someone desperate in a clinic. It's another to convince someone on their couch that they need genetic testing for a condition they've just accepted as normal.
It will be fascinating to watch them deploy that $1.1 billion war chest to solve that exact puzzle.
It certainly will. And with that, we wrap up today's deep dive into the source material. Thank you for joining us on this translation exercise. Keep your eyes on those upcoming clinical readouts. Watch how that HSV1 delivery truck handles the new cargo. And we will see you on the next deep dive.